Hello, everyone out there. This is Tom Holland, welcoming you to $2 Late Fee with Zach Sheffer and Dustin Rubin. And I'm talking about Cloak and Dagger and Fright Night. And I hope you enjoy listening to this as much as I did talking to Dustin and Zach. Thank you very much.
You and we never saw each other in person, but I did an interview with you years ago on my other show, Podcasting After Dark, and it
Okay,
was
okay.
all on the phone. And within like the first 5 minutes of the interview, I had mentioned how much Cloak and Dagger meant to me. I think we had, a fairly short conversation about it, but after that, it had stayed with me. And I thought, you know what? I know you've done interviews for like Vinegar Syndrome and have spoken about Cloak and Dagger, but seeing how it's the 40th anniversary of this movie
Oh,
in
it's
August.
frightening. It's frightening.
It's frightening.
It's the 41st anniversary of Psycho 2.
Right.
It's
I mean, Mikey, usually in Hollywood you're sensitive about your age, but I'm so old I can start bragging about it.
You
I
should
mean,
be, sir.
yeah, I'm 80 years old and I'm still here.
Right. That's something to be
it's
praised for sure.
absolutely, it's something amazing. I mean, look, yeah, we keep talking about how, there's so many movies that obviously came out in 84. It's the 40th anniversary. It doesn't seem it makes me very uncomfortable personally because it doesn't seem that long ago. And, and the movies mean so much to us, like Cloak and Dagger. Um, I think really we were just kind of interested in sort of how you came to be writing that project, because one thing we've said, one thing that has terrified me, and I kept using the word terrified really because when I revisited this movie, the realism of adults trying to murder children
Yeah.
was so, it was such an 80s like you couldn't really do it now in a way that wasn't a little cartoony or a
No, you
little,
could not. You could
right?
not.
So when you were writing that, were you like, I guess what was your feeling?
The only prohibition that I remember was that you couldn't point the gun directly at his head,
Okay.
at the boy's head, at Davy's head. That was the only prohibition. And I got away with some lines of dialogue in that, which now I look back on them and I say, "Oh my gosh, how did they ever let me do that?" I mean, there's the line where Murphy, the bad guy, is tracking him down at night on the San Antonio Riverwalk, and he says, I don't know, he says, give me the videotape with the secret plans, or I'm gonna gut shoot you, and you're gonna
Yep.
die in horrible pain. I'm my goodness, what was I thinking? But how old was I? I was like 39 or something like that, you
Right.
know? So, in a way, I was a kid myself, and I was just thrilled I was writing it, and it
Right.
was going to get made. So, no, you couldn't do it today, and at the same time, it's 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 a it's a sleeper hit in the sense that Universal dumped it when it came out because it had been put into production by the previous head of the studio that had been deposed, which is very common in
Yep.
Hollywood. The
Right.
Bob Remy had given the go ahead off of the strength of Psycho 2. And then Bob, who was a very nice man, they he was forced out. I don't know why, and they brought in Frank Price, who had been the former head of Columbia, and he brought along with him Marvin Antonowski, and Marvin was known as the mad programmer or something like that of CBS. He was a great believer in polls, and he was the one that convinced Columbia and Frank Price not to make E.T. and to instead make was Star something. Though John Carpenter directed it.
Oh, Starman?
Starman, yeah.
Yeah.
And Marvin had convinced them to make Starman, which of course I think was, if it wasn't a failure, it had very, very mediocre returns.
True.
And E.T. turned out to be the biggest grossing movie of the year.
Right.
So much for Marvin Antonowski, who by the way, I knew, met socially several times and seemed like a very nice man to me. But he came in, Frank Price, as far as what happened is that the head of the studio, and I forget, Wasserman, I think Wasserman, saw the film at his home studio in Beverly Hills, Cloak and Dagger, and loved it and was very complimentary. And the Sid Sheinberg, he told Sid Sheinberg how great it was. Sheinberg called Richard Franklin into the Black Tower, which is that big building at
Universal. Yeah, infamous.
And told them that the Wasserman liked it, and then, and he Sheinberg had not seen it by that point. And I think Richard Franklin was very impressed because Sid Sheinberg didn't talk to anybody except Spielberg. He didn't talk to any other directors. And he said, "Well, has Frank Price seen it?" And Sheinberg said, "Well, let's ask him." And walked Richard down the hall to Frank Price's office and asked him. And Frank Price said he was watching it that night in his home screening room. This is back maybe a beat before VHS.
Okay.
When they ran the film, the bigwigs ran the film. They all had private screening rooms, and they had union projectionists who ran it, and then that was what it was like in 1983 or 4 or whatever.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Richard thought it was some kind of a political power play between execs in the Black Tower, but he never really knew. Anyway, Frank Price called them and said, "Hey, it's a very good film." After seeing it, said, "Hey, it's a very good film, but I don't know why Bob Raimi said go ahead and make it. I don't know who's going to watch this." and Richard Franklin suggested, "Well, perhaps because it stars the same boy from E.T."
Right.
Right. But that didn't have any sway. And Antonowski came in to take a look at it with Richard and Andrew London, the editor, in the screening room at Universal. And he'd had a 3-martini luncheon and proceeded to fall asleep immediately when the film ran. So that was what those guys told me about it. And it was dumped. They put it out, and they put no marketing behind it. And part of the reason, of course, for that was it wasn't their film. It was the previous head of the studio, Bob Raimi's. And then what happened is it went on cable. This is as cable now is growing like wildfire.
Right.
And it became, as a VHS tape and on cable, it became an enormous hit. And I forget what, but finally people had a chance to see it. And anybody who saw it, probably like you guys, who was anywhere between 8 or 9 or 10 and 15, 16, fell madly in love with the film.
Yeah.
And it's a film that people have been asking me about ever since. So, in that sense, it's very gratifying. We did a screening, I don't know, a number of years ago now, down at the New Beverly, which is Tarantino's theater.
Yep, great theater.
Yeah, and I went out and I stood up to speak to the audience, and I looked at them, and everybody was like 34, 35 years old with their girlfriend. But it was that audience that has seen it as adolescents, pre-teeners, that has seen it on cable.
Right.
And so I knew that it had a massive effect with at least with specific generations, in who had seen it at that age. And I'm amazed that it's never been remade. They've remade everything else of mine and screwed it up. Why
Right.
shouldn't they remake Cloak and Dagger and screw that up?
But
I did. I was approached maybe a year or two ago by Will Ferrell,
okay.
because what it has is it's a great starring role, because the star is playing two characters. He's
Right.
playing not only Dad, but he's also playing Jack Black. So, I mean, I'm hoping at some point that maybe somebody will figure it out, and maybe somebody will say, "Hey, let's do a movie with a young boy hero, boy, emphasis on boy as opposed to female in these very woke times."
Right. Right.
But I mean, I'm not depending on that either, as I watch Hollywood slowly crash and burn.
Right.
I mean, all I do is watch the plunging grosses every year, and less and less people watching the Academy Awards. So I don't know
Yeah.
if anybody knows what the hell's go. I don't know
Right.
if any of them have a business model anymore that
Well,
Yeah.
works.
I will tell you really quickly, you mentioning the fact that it's a boy-centric film, and mostly kids our age when we were 8, 9, 10 years old going and seeing it. Um, my father, and we talked about this on the previous episode, my father at the time, I was around roughly the same age when it came out. He looked very similar to Dabney Coleman. He was a
Ah,
firefighter. And I put a picture on our Instagram comparing the two, Henry Thomas and Dabney Coleman, and myself and my dad. And he was very much Jack Flack. Davy Osborne's dad was my on-screen father. So there was a lot of connection there. And I was going through, my parents had split up at that time. I had moved to
uh,
California away from my dad. So there was this disconnect. And this film was all about reconnecting with your father,
yeah, yeah.
and finding that link. And so it's a very personal film, specifically for me. I'm just curious, like from the inception, when you had envisioned writing the script for Cloak and Dagger, had you always envisioned it being about a role-playing game, video game connection?
No, because those were just video games were just coming in. My memory is they did an arcade Atari video game, but in an arcade.
Right.
They didn't
Yeah.
they didn't they didn't have home computers that you could, there
No,
was
they
the
didn't have
internet.
this.
Yeah, they
Right.
didn't have that. No. Oh, that you do have that. Okay.
It's
Well,
a it's a prop, but yeah.
okay, well, I think there's a scene, or maybe I'm confusing it with Psycho 2, but where Richard Franklin's playing an arcade game. No, it's William Forsythe. It's
Yes,
with the great character actor William Forsythe.
fantastic.
The role
Yep,
of Morris.
that's right. I mean, it's if I ended up doing a Masters of Horror episode with William Forsythe,
Right.
who was just a terrific actor. And I did a series called Twisted Tales, five of
Yes.
which are pretty good, five of which
Hmm.
are not, because we didn't have any money. The- But with William Forsythe.
Yeah, you need
And
money.
yeah, and I couldn't, I couldn't, I was shocked when I realized that William had pretty much started out his career playing Morris, who owned the video game store
Right.
that Davy got the video from, with the secret plans to the jet that couldn't
Hmm.
be seen.
The invisible
Yes.
Yeah,
jet. Right. Right.
yeah,
Wonder
yeah.
Woman's jet.
Uh,
Yeah.
Kidding, of course.
yeah, well, William Forsythe gained like 20 or 30 pounds for that part.
Oh, he's not even recognizable.
No,
Just a few years later, he was doing a movie called Extreme Prejudice with Walter Hill, and had kind of transformed into this thuggish brute of a
yeah,
guy, and the rest is history from there. So,
yeah.
but so
Wow.
so had it always been about a kid wanting like versus spies, kid versus spy movie?
No, what it was I was what happened was Richard was given the remake of The Window, which
Okay,
was the juvenile version by Cornell Woolrich, but his juvenile version of Rear Window.
right.
And it's a classic Boy Who Cried Wolf story. The kid's looking out the window and sees a murder in the house next door. And that, at the time, that seemed like a story that had been told 100 million times to me.
Right.
And I said, you know, I mean, I said, if you really wanted to do that and make it fresh, have the kid be a mad horror fan and look out the window and see a vampire next door chomping down on, you know, on a beautiful girl.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard said, "Oh, not bad." So we went and we pitched that at Universal, the Black Tower, and they threw us out. Threw
Wow.
me out because
Wow.
vampires
Get
at
out.
that moment were dead, dead, dead.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So I said to Richard, how do I make this fresh? And I came up with Jack Flack. I said, let's give the kid. We all have secret friends when we're really young,
Yep.
or friends that only we see. And I said, so let's give him that, and let's take advantage of all these role playing games and Dungeons and Dragons and all of that, which was just beginning then.
Right. Right.
And that's how I came up with it. And then I did that. I think that I said his wife had died of cancer. Dabney's wife had died of cancer, and I could direct the film towards what I hope would be a very moving end, where the boy who had a difficult relationship with his father would realize his father was his imaginary hero, and I could have the connection made between the two of them at the end.
I love
And
that.
yeah, and that's how I came. I was an original story, but I mean it's credited in the credits with the window, and I think that Universal ended up paying Cornell Woolrich's estate $100,000, which is a lot of money in 1980
Whoa. Yeah.
or whatever it was.
Wow. Okay.
So that's the backstory behind it. And then I wrote it, and there was, I think at that point, we turned the script in, and I think that Bob Ramey was already gone. It was Frank Price in, and there was ambivalence from the studio about it because the new regime had come in,
Yeah.
and I think they gave Richards somebody to supposedly pump up the dialogue, but as I remember, they changed hardly anything at all, and somehow we got it made in the confusion of the new regime coming in.
Wow. Wow.
And they had put the money. The star was not Dabney. The star was Henry Thomas
Yeah.
because of E.T.
Yep.
And there was a whole story about I don't know how much I should say because I meant Dabney I was involved with pre-production all the way through with Richard,
Okay.
going down and looking at locations in San Antonio, and we met Henry Thomas and his family down there, and wonderful times. But once it began to shoot, I was working on something else, and I only came into it at the very end when they were shooting the airport on set at Universal.
Oh wow.
The finale,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah,
big-
and I met Dabney. It was very, very nice. But I met him. Here's the writer. Here's the star. And you know, hello, how are you? One blah blah. And you know, I didn't. I mean, he seemed very nice, but it was very quick. It's not like I spent a couple of hours. I didn't even do that. I saw him shooting the bit where they put the match cut where they put the Jack Flack down on the board, and you go to it and it's for real live with Jack Flack at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they try to assassinate the woman and or whatever happened.
Yeah.
Jack Flack stops it. I saw that. I saw that being filmed, but what happened was that Richard Franklin, the director, had wanted Kevin Kline
As Jack Flack.
as Jack Flack. Yeah, and I don't know why, but I do know why. The studio said take Dabney Coleman because Dabney was very hot at that moment.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
because he'd had that television series, Buffalo Bob, Buffalo Bill.
Right.
Yeah, and Dabney was very hot off of 9 to 5.
You're right.
Also, which is sort of, I think really 9 to 5 is what really took his career up to a new level.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I also knew Colin Higgins, who wrote and directed 9 to 5, and but that he didn't have the effect on Cloak and Dagger, but the Richard was not happy that he ended up with Dabney. He thought Dabney was wrong, and there was tension between Dabney and Richard Franklin. And I was told that Dabney had referenced that, or was aware of it, or had mentioned it, because my wife's cousin is an Irish actor, terrific Irish actor named Bergen, Patrick Bergen.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
fantastic actor. Yeah.
and there was a whole group. I'm sure it's still going on, but there were actors have hung out all my life at Dan Tana's,
I was
which is the bar restaurant down on Santa Monica, about right next to Doheny,
right.
and
Mhm.
that's where Patrick Bergen, whenever he was in town working here, would go down and he'd drink. He was Irish, of course. They went to the best bar, and Dabney apparently was in there every night.
Yeah.
I think they even had a steak named after him, the Dabney Coleman steak or something. But anyway, Richard Franklin talked to I'm not Richard Franklin, Patrick Bergen talked to Dabney, and Dabney told him he'd had a difficult relationship with Richard Franklin during the making of the movie. But
Right.
I was not there and wasn't privy to any of that, so I don't know. That's just sort of backhanded, but somehow, but I thought Dabney was just terrific.
I think so
The
too. And it was really playing against type. And I mean, Dustin and I talked about this, that, in 9 to 5, obviously he's playing a very particular role, Modern Problems, a very particular role, a lot of Tootsie, like these movies that he's known for, whether he's the star or a supporting actor, he kind of has, a little bit of an ass quality to him. And then in Cloak and Dagger, he's this struggling dad who's trying to do right by his son, and also plays a total badass too in Jack Flack. And so it was so nice to see an actor playing against type for a change. And obviously, whether you were there for one day or all the days, it's your words. It's your words on that paper. It's your words that
yeah,
are being acted out. And it is phenomenal. Like Dustin and I said, Henry Thomas, well, Dustin, right? You said Henry Thomas might be one of the greatest actors ever.
I said it and I stick to it. I mean, the scenes between, Davy and Jack Flack and Davy and Dad are all incredibly real. Like there's nothing, goofy about it. And for a kid who is being basically hunted for the 90% of this movie, right? He he has a calm to him, but it is like it is always like, well, how is it going to be? I'm basically a real spy now. It's all real. And then Jack Black is telling him like, yeah, well, the reality of being a spy is you sometimes got to kill people or be killed. And then Davey has a hard time with that, and that, but I think Henry Thomas handles that beautifully.
Yeah, I agree. Have you had a chance to talk to him?
Not yet. Not yet. That's
We have not.
that's
We've
on
got
our list.
some reachers out or some requests out to him, but I think another thing too that's very interesting, and I wanted to get your take on this, is like, so in the 80s, as 80s kids, we had sort of this slogan, which was like stranger danger, right? Don't talk to strangers. It was a scary world. You had to look out for the windowless vans. You had to, you just had to be prepared with strangers. And in this case, like, what's sort of scarier than having some spies try and kill you is that the adults that you trust don't believe you. And so you've kind of written this film where every adult, Davey has no one to go to other than his friend Kim. And I think that to me is one of the most groundless, scary things about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that was the time of Latchkey Kids, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Sure was.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, I don't know, but it all played in. I mean, it's sort of a classic story setup. You know, at the very beginning, your hero ends up being given something which is very dangerous and a lot of bad guys want.
Right.
And when I took a little kid, because I had Henry was a given going in.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
You know, that was it. I went down with Richard to San Antonio for the meeting with Henry and his parents, but that was because Bob Ramey said, go ahead and make it on the strength of having Henry Thomas as the star. It wasn't for
Okay.
Dabney, it was for Henry.
Right.
He was why that movie got made. And I don't know, but Frank Price dumping the movie and not valuing Henry's stardom as an adolescent at that point may have been because he made the disastrous mistake not to make E.T. You know, and
Right.
ended up being, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it was always about trying to move you toward the end, at the very end, when finally Davy looks back as Jack Flack walks out of the flames behind the jet exploding, and his father just saved him. And his father and Jack Flack become one and the same.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It really is. It
You
really
know,
is. Did you
and
were you a father at that time? Did you have kids of your own at that time?
yes, I did. Uh, Josh was born in 1965, 75. He would have been a teenager. It might have been a few years older than you guys.
Okay.
I don't know how that played into it though. That I don't that I don't remember. I don't think I was writing about myself and my own relationship with Josh. I was just trying to write very. I knew that if I could move you at the end, I thought I'd have a hit.
Sure
You
did.
know,
Yeah.
and it was at that moment in time. It was terribly important as a screenwriter who wanted to direct to make money for the studios.
Right.
Yep.
And I mean, a couple of great things came out of Cloak and Dagger. The story that I originally pitched, that's Fright Night,
Right.
and I could not get that. I couldn't sell that because at that moment, vampires were dead, dead, dead. I don't mean just dead as a carry,
Yeah.
as a
Not literally dead,
but they were
that's what you
they
mean.
were the kiss of death in terms of Hollywood making a film about them. They'd had a huge disaster with the Broadway musical of Dracula with Frank Langella,
Oh yeah, that's
Oh,
right.
and
yeah.
Robert Wise had
Right.
directed.
Wow. Yeah, that's taken us back for sure.
Yeah, but I mean that was like 1980, and
Right.
then you'd also had George Hamilton had done Love at First Bite.
Yeah, my mom took me to see that.
Okay, well when they start doing farces or
Right.
spoofs of a genre, the genre is exhausted and dead.
Exactly.
I give you Chucky as an example.
Right.
The of Child's Play, but I I love the concept of Fright Night, and I couldn't get anybody in Hollywood to buy that. So after Cloak and Dagger, I couldn't get the idea out of my head, and I kept saying to myself, "Well, if I was a teenage horror fan and I was convinced the next door neighbor was a vampire, who would I go to for help?"
Yep.
And so I had the premise, but I didn't have a story. And then I realized suddenly that I'd grown up now this is back around the early 60s. I had grown up watching horror movies on the local independent TV channel and we called them the Friday Night Frights.
Yeah,
And
nice.
they always had a host,
Right.
Elvira, Stagger Lee, and they were corny.
Right.
They couldn't have been, and they had no money, and they always came out of graveyards with paper mache tombstones and that kind of thing, and
funny.
there'd be some guy blowing fog in from a $1.95 fog machine. You'd see him on TV. And I said, well, of course, that's who Charlie Brewster, my hero, would go to. He'd go to the host of the Friday Night Frights, which they would call Fright Night, and I have my title. And
Right.
I spec that script. But if I hadn't done Cloak and Dagger and been trying to figure out how to do a remake of The Window, Cornell Woolrich's The Window, I never would have came up with the concept for Fright Night.
Well, what I'm noticing really quickly is the beautiful connection between the two movies, because what you have here is a protagonist that no one believes. And the difference being in Cloak and Dagger, he's got his imaginary friend to help him through these settings. And in Fright Night, he's got this imaginary hero that he sees on TV who turns out to be a total fraud, right? So it's this idea of, as a kid, when you're 8, everything is possible when you're 8, right? Everything's imaginable, everything is wonderful. But you become a teenager, you become cynical, you become sarcastic, you become, oh, this is the real world, right? And so in this real world, Charlie suddenly now is like crestfallen when he realizes his idol is this idiot on TV, who is masterful, by the way. I mean, I know, like personally, Fright Night is one of my all-time favorite films, and I just cherish that movie from the bottom of my heart. I just think it's wonderful, down to the amazing soundtrack. On our show on $2 Late Fee, we not only talk about movies that we love, but also the music, the soundtrack to those films. Cloak and Dagger having a wonderful score, but Fright Night having a fantastic soundtrack.
Yes, it did. And the man who did that, my music supervisor, David Shackler, died about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Heart attack.
So sorry.
He put that together. That was, I don't know if they've done it before. I'm sure they have, but those songs were written. The needle drops were written specifically for the scenes in that movie in Fright Night. And then you have that terrific score electronically by, and the name just went out of my head. He did Terminator.
Oh yeah, we've Brad Fidel. We've had him on our show.
Brad Fidel. And you had Brad Fidel doing the underscore, but the needle drops were because of David putting it together with somebody at Warner Brothers, and it's just a terrific soundtrack score. I don't know if I've ever had one as good. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, because we often talk about our favorite soundtracks, and Fright Night is one of my favorite soundtracks because it's got in knowing that those songs were made for that movie versus picking top 40 songs that you heard on the radio, which is fine too, but it has a different vibe to it, obviously, when you apply it to the film.
We never could have afforded the top 40 songs.
Well, glad you didn't. Glad you didn't. The dance scene would have had a whole other vibe to it if you were dancing to Disco Fever by Chic or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we're sitting here and we're talking about it 40 years ago, but I mean, it's a dumb luck. I mean, the Lord has to be smiling down on you sometimes.
No doubt.
And other times he's looking in the other direction. So.
Well, you just had a screening at the New Beverly. Speaking of the New Beverly, you just had a screening of Fright Night not that long ago with several of the cast members returning, right?
Yes. What happened was I did a podcast for Manifest Media of the original cast reading Fright Night. Yeah. And I think it'll come out in July. And I wanted to get that while we were all still here, except for Roddy.
Yeah.
Who's been gone for a long time. But I mean, I had an opportunity because of Jack Levy and Mark Nell, the two guys with Manifest Media. They asked me to come in and do and do a part as a voice actor in a horror script.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, and I did it. And when I did that, I sort of discovered the world of dramatic readings,
Right.
which is sort of echoes back into radio, dramatic radio, which nobody but me remembers.
Well, you're talking to two guys who definitely, because Dustin and I both are voice actors, so we definitely have a love of all things audio.
Okay, well, anyway, I did this small part, and I said, well, hey, if you got this, how would you like to do an original cast reading of Fright Night? And Jack Levy and Mark Nell, the two guys, and they have you can look them up on IMDb. They have a big, they've been in sound forever.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, yeah. And so we managed to bring out the cast that wasn't here. We got Chris Sarandon and Bill Ragsdale and Amanda Burris flew in for it. Jonathan Billy Cole was here in
Jonathan
town.
Stark, yep.
Jonathan Stark and Dorothy Fielding, who plays Judy Brewster.
Yep.
So we put them at great expense, I might add. We put everybody together in a recording room out here in Burbank. Excellent. I forget the name of it, but excellent, tech and equipment and everything. And we did a kick-ass original cast reading.
That's so cool. Stephen Jeffries obviously was there too. Stephen Jeffries.
Oh, Stephen Jeffries flew down from San Francisco.
Right.
But I mean, interestingly enough, everybody except Roddy is still alive.
Well, it's interesting. I believe it was in 2020 or 2021, perhaps, or maybe 2019. There was a fundraiser in Michigan that did a cast reading of Fright Night, and my son. It's the first time I showed Fright Night to my son because he was, I think, 7 at the time or 6. So I was like, well, this movie's not yet. You're not mature enough yet to understand this film, but he knows how special it is to me. And I said, let's watch this because he loves stage plays and it was wonderful. You had Mark Hamill playing Roddy McDowall's role in the film.
Well, for the cast reading, Mark Hamill came back to play Peter Vincent.
Very cool.
Roddy McDowall part, and Rosario Dawson came back. And they had both been there in that money raising thing back in, I think, like 2020. I think that was the 20s. I think it was 2020.
I think it was 2020. Yeah. Yeah.
But that was what gave me the idea. I heard that.
Wonderful.
I heard that in 2020, and there was no way I could release that to the public. That was a fundraiser.
Right.
For a political fundraiser. But once I heard that, and I thought that was just great, but I thought the cast reading that we just did was even greater because that was concentrated on the drama of the movie, the screenplay.
Yeah.
There were, and what made it work was we got all the actors in one room where they could look at each other. And you get a certain kind of energy as voice actors when you're all there. This is as opposed to somebody running a track, just a single track on you on Zoom and a single track on some, and then putting it together. When you do that, it's different when you're sitting there and you have a piece of material that plays like Fright Night does. I mean, it plays dramatically as a reading for the characters, and there's an energy when they're all there looking. And also it's a lot of fun because you sort of mix in with some comments from everybody when somebody does a really good job, or somebody, welcome to Fright Night, when that roll trilling the R's that Chris Sarandon does. Anyway, I thought it was terrific when they did it in 2020, but I thought it was even better when we did it, like, I don't know, 2.5, 3 months ago.
That's excellent. So are you saying that you said it's coming out this July?
Coming out this July, the 40th anniversary cast reading of Fright Night with the original cast.
That is exciting.
Oh
That's-
boy, it is for me too. It is for me too. It is for me too. It's I couldn't be more excited.
It's
You
really
know,
awesome.
so
My friend Jack Daniel, who's a voice
yes,
actor,
yes,
was involved in that. I don't know if he did some narration. He didn't really say what he did,
he did
but
the narration,
yeah, I assume.
which is
Yeah.
a
Yep.
very special skill,
Yeah.
Dustin. Do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I mean, it that seems like a different skill than just being a voice actor. I mean, I don't mean to put down playing a role, being dramatic,
No,
but
no. I mean, at the end of the day, right? It's all acting, emotion, attitude, storytelling. I mean, whether you're on screen or not, but yeah, no, it's all very different. But I saw some of his photos and I was like, oh, that's gonna be good.
no, that was Jack Daniel who did
Yeah.
it, and I think he's just
Yeah.
excellent. And
Yeah.
I've written a Fright Night novel called Fright Night Resurrection,
Yes.
which we hope to do as a podcast. But it's going to be a long one. That I mean, Fright Night is a 90-minute movie.
Right.
You know, so I mean that's very contained. It's 3 acts.
Right.
Whereas Fright Night Resurrection is a book and it's 100,000 words,
Right.
and it's going to be a huge challenge for the narrator. So we'll see how that goes.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm trying to put that together. Trying to put that together right now.
Let's have it done
I love
before
it.
your birthday. How about that?
Yes, wouldn't that be nice?
It would
Wouldn't
be.
that be nice? Yeah.
It would
Well,
be.
well, what happened was it was a spec script.
Okay.
Fright Night. I wasn't paid to write that. I was compelled to write it. And
I love that.
yeah, that was from the heart. That's me as a teenager, Dustin. I mean, no, I'm Charlie Brewster.
Okay.
That's the reason I think that Fright Night is so extraordinary is it's a love letter to horror fans everywhere.
Yeah, it really
And
is.
it's become multi-generational, like you're talking about, Zach. When that movie was released, it was an R,
Right.
and then the only reason it was an R was because I had that girl bare-breasted being chomped down on by Jerry Dandridge in the window next door.
Right.
But with the way horror is gone, where it turned into it broke every taboo that they could break.
Yeah.
That's sort of where it's been for the last 5-10 years. But Fright Night is a love letter to horror fans everywhere about the genre they love. And the few conventions I've gone to, I've had multiple generations show up at my table to tell me how much they love the movie. That means grandparents, kids, and grandkids.
Right.
So I mean, it has been the movie that parents use to introduce their young kids to horror. Which I'm madly enthusiastic about. Unlike Child's Play, which is genuinely scary. But now I'm shocked that people come up to me and they say, "Well, we showed it to our 7. We showed Child's Play, the creation of Chucky, to our 7 or 8-year-old kids," and I think that's too early for that film. But
I
anyway,
agree. Well, I will tell you, Fright Night and Cloak and Dagger are 2 comfort films for me. They're 2 films that I watch that bring me back to a nostalgic joy and continue to influence me. And just to toot your own horn really quick, that my son is very much immersed in my pop culture because he hears it all. Dustin knows. He's like, "Oh, what did you traumatize Zach or Bodie with this time?" But Cloak and Dagger obviously has very personal feels for one reason, but Fright Night was always my go-to comfort film, and it still continues to be. And I'm so happy that 40 years later we're talking about it with the same enthusiasm and the same respect that we had way back when.
it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is, and that's a
I mean,
testament to you.
well, yeah, but I mean, Mark Hamill, he came in to play Peter Vincent because he felt the same way when he saw it when he was whatever age.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Mhm.
Rosario Dawson is in love with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean that film, Fright Night. I love Cloak and Dagger, all right,
Yeah.
but Fright Night has a truly unique position in the genre because of all the affection. People love the film.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think there's a sweetness in the film. You know, in
Yeah.
Fright Night. You know, and I think that there's a lot of the same emotions are in Cloak and Dagger, but the horror genre exploded during that time
Oh
and ever
yeah.
since, and has become its own behemoth out there, its own genre that in a lot of cases carries Hollywood along at this point. And
Right.
that's
Right.
I think that uh, made Fright Night rise to its unique position in the culture.
Totally
It's
agree. Totally agree.
multi-generational now.
And I will say it's one of the reasons why I was excited to eat fruit because I saw a vampire eating fruit. So
Well,
um,
that's because fruit. That's Chris Sarandon doing a little research and coming up with fruit bats.
it's really brilliant. It's really brilliant. It's like it's such a subtle little thing that no one would pick up on if you unless you really read into it, you know.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
that. Mr. Holland, it's really been a pleasure to have you on our
Same
show.
here, fellas. Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.